Montana Territory, June 1879. The wind carried dust and heat across the dry earth as Violet Vance stood at the edge of a burned-out homestead, her hands clenched at her sides. The fire had taken everything. Her neighbor's barn sparked it, and the wind did the rest. Her small cabin, the garden she had planted with her children, the quilts her mother sewed, all of it gone in one afternoon. She had 2 children, Laurel and Levi, both under 10, and nowhere to take them now. Violet squinted against the sun. Her bonnet offered little shade, and the ache in her shoulders from hauling water all morning was just starting to settle in. She had not cried. Not yet. She could not afford to. The creak of saddle leather broke the silence behind her. "Ma'am?" a quiet voice asked. Violet turned. The man on horseback looked like he carried more dust than skin. His clothes were worn, plain, his hat pulled low, shadowing a face that had seen more than one hard year. His horse was big, black, and steady. The cowboy dismounted slow, respectful, like he knew what she had lost. His boots hit the ground soft. He held his hat in his hands now. "I saw the smoke from the ridge," he said. "Thought someone might need help." Violet nodded, but her voice caught. "It's gone. Everything." The cowboy looked past her, toward the blackened remains of her home. He let out a breath like he had carried it all the way down the mountain. "I'm sorry," he said. "Name's Porter Rhoades. Violet Vance." She looked down at her children. Laurel clung to her skirt, her eyes hollow. Levi stood still, clutching the wooden horse his father had carved before he died last year. "You got any kin nearby?" Porter asked, glancing at the children. "No. My sister passed last spring. My husband before that." Her voice was flat. "I got these 2. That's it." Porter nodded once. "I got a small place, out past the ridge. It ain't much, but it's dry and there's room. I got a spare room and a clean bed. You could stay, just until you figure things out." Violet stared at him. "You do this for every widow with a burned house?" "No," he said simply. "But I saw your boy holding onto what's left of his father, that horse. And I figured maybe he shouldn't have to say goodbye to everything all at once." She blinked hard, looked away. "I don't want your charity," she said. "It ain't charity. It's a neighbor offering what he's got." Laurel tugged her skirt. "Mama, I'm thirsty." Porter reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a canteen. He knelt and handed it to the little girl, who looked up at him warily before drinking. Violet exhaled slow. Her pride was a stubborn thing, but her children were already sunburned and exhausted. She met his eyes. "Just for a night." "Understood." Porter's ranch sat in a narrow valley where the creek still ran cold and the grass grew thick. His house was simple, 2 rooms and a porch that faced west. He helped unload what little she had salvaged: a scorched trunk, a cracked kettle, a few books. She did not ask for help, but he offered it anyway, quiet and steady. That night, Violet sat on the porch with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The children were asleep inside. Porter sat a few feet away, whittling a piece of wood with a small knife. The moonlight cast soft silver over the land. "You do not have to keep doing this," she said. He looked over. "Doing what?" "Being kind." He nodded, thoughtful. "You are not used to it." "No," he went back to carving. "Then I will keep doing it until you are." She looked at him. He did not look away. "You do not even know me," she said. "I know what it looks like when someone is trying to hold themselves together for 2 little ones. I know what it feels like to lose more than you thought you could stand. And I know you are still standing." Violet swallowed. "Do not promise me anything." "I won't," he said. "Not unless I mean it." She stood. "Good. Because forever is a long time, and I do not believe in it." He paused, then looked up at her. "Then I will prove it every day," he said. She stared at him, heart caught between caution and something warmer. "You do not even know what you are promising." "I do," he said. "I am not asking for anything, just letting you know I will be here. Every day. As long as you want me to be." The next weeks passed with quiet rhythm. Violet helped tend the vegetable garden out back. Porter built a small pen for 2 goats he traded for in town. Laurel and Levi began to smile again. In the evenings, Violet sat on the porch while Porter read to the children from the old Bible or carved small toys from scraps of pine. She never asked for more, but he gave it anyway. One morning, as she hung laundry on the line, Violet watched Porter teaching Levi how to hammer nails into a board. The boy beamed with pride. Laurel picked wildflowers nearby. The sight made Violet's chest ache, not with pain, but with something more dangerous: hope. That night, she found Porter in the barn, brushing down his horse. "I never meant to stay this long," she said. He looked up. "You can leave whenever you like." She stepped closer. He smelled like cedar and sweat and dust. "I do not want to leave," she said softly. He nodded once. "Then do not. But I need to know you are not trying to rescue me." "I am not," he said. "I am just standing beside you. That is all. You keep saying you will prove it. Every day." He stepped closer. "Then let me start now." His hand brushed hers. She did not pull away. Her breath caught. "You are not afraid?" she asked. "Of what?" "Of me not believing in forever." He smiled, not wide, just enough. "I am not afraid of anything that gives me a chance to love you." Violet's throat tightened. She looked down, then up again. "You mean that?" "I do." She stepped into his arms, slow. "Sure." Porter held her gently, like she was something fragile but not broken. And for the first time in a long time, Violet closed her eyes and rested her head against someone who was not going to leave. Not tomorrow. Not the next day. He had not promised forever. But he was proving it. Already. The hens Porter had bartered for were laying regular now, and Violet gathered the warm eggs before the sun crested the far bluff. Her fingers were chilled from the dew still clinging to the grass, and the basket on her arm held just enough promise to feel like a small victory. Inside the house, Laurel sat at the table, her legs swinging above the floor, humming tunelessly while she stitched a scrap of muslin Porter had given her the day before. Levi knelt by the hearth, stacking kindling Porter had split at first light. Violet set the basket down and brushed her hands clean on her apron. "You two finish your chores and we'll head to the creek," she said, glancing toward the window where the sycamores filtered the morning light. Porter was gone for the day. He'd ridden out before dawn to help a neighbor repair a broken wagon axle. He'd left a note in his careful hand, leaning against the coffee tin on the table. She hadn't read it twice. Once was enough. By midday, Violet sat knee-deep in the stream, her skirts gathered around her thighs, cool water rushing past. Laurel waited nearby, chasing minnows with cupped hands. Levi balanced on a flat rock, tossing pebbles as far as his small arms allowed. Sunlight danced over the water, and for the first time in weeks, Violet didn't think about what she'd lost, only what was here. When they returned, she found a bundle wrapped in oilcloth on the porch bench. Inside was a spool of blue thread, a small tin of preserves, and a folded piece of flannel in a pale floral print. She traced the pattern with her thumb, heart catching at the thought of Porter noticing the worn hem of her Sunday dress the day before. That evening, as the children dozed by the hearth, Violet stood at the stove, stirring stew with one hand, the other resting on the edge of the counter. Porter came in quiet, his coat dusted with the color of the road. He set his hat on the peg, glanced at the children, then met her eyes. "You didn't have to bring all that," she said, not turning from the pot. "I know," he said, But I wanted to. She ladled the stew into the pot's center, careful not to let it boil over. I've never been good at depending on anyone, she said. He leaned his shoulder against the doorframe. You're not. You're sharing the work. She turned then, arms crossed, her apron streaked with flour. And you? What do you get out of it? His gaze didn't shift. A full table, company, a reason to come home. She didn't answer. Instead, she took 2 bowls down from the shelf and handed one to him. He brought it to the table, waited until she sat before dipping his spoon. Later, after the children were tucked into their quilts, she stepped onto the porch. The sky was full of stars, the kind you only saw far from town. Porter joined her without a word, handing her a mug of coffee. They stood in silence, the night air cool on their skin. I used to think if I just worked hard enough, I could hold everything together, she said, her voice low. But the fire taught me I was wrong. He didn't interrupt. I'm still not sure what's left of me, she added. You're standing, he said. That's enough. She sipped the coffee, the warmth steady in her hands. You ever lose something you thought you couldn't live without? He nodded once. My brother died during a cattle drive out of Fort Benton. I was just 18. He was 22. Got caught in a flash flood. She looked at him, surprised. He'd never spoken of family before. After that, I stopped thinking life owed me anything, he said. Figured if I wanted something good, I'd have to build it myself. And if it burns down, then I start again, with whoever's willing to help stack the first beam. She set the mug down on the railing. You think something good can come out of ruin? I think it already has. Violet didn't move, but her fingers curled around the wood rail. You don't make things easy, she said. I'm not trying to, he replied. They stood there until the wind picked up, rustling the tall grass beyond the fence. She turned to him then, and something settled in her gaze, less fear, more wondering. I don't know what comes next, she said. You don't have to, he said. Not tonight. She nodded, slow. Then, without thinking, she reached up and brushed a lock of hair from his brow. He caught her wrist gently, his thumb brushing the inside of her palm. Violet, he said, her name almost a whisper. She didn't pull away. I'm not asking for forever, he said. Just tomorrow. And the day after, if you'll let me. Her voice was very soft. Then prove it. I will. And he did, by staying right there beside her, quiet, steady, and sure. Violet folded Porter's shirt with deliberate care, smoothing the sleeves before placing it in the crate by the door. The seams had come loose under the arm, and she'd stitched them that afternoon while the children napped and the wind rattled softly through the cottonwoods. The house was quiet now, dusk turning the windows to dusky mirrors. Porter returned just past sundown, leading a roan mare with a pale blaze down her face. She limped slightly on her front leg. Found her tangled in barbed wire near the south fence, he said. Didn't look like she'd been claimed. Violet stepped down from the porch, wiping her palms on her skirt. She'll need poultices. I was hoping you'd say that, he said, guiding the mare toward the lean-to. Violet didn't ask how far he'd ridden or how long he'd spent coaxing the frightened animal free. She could see it in his shoulders, the kind of weariness that came from choosing to stay soft in a world that often punished it. Inside the barn, she gathered strips of muslin and dipped them into a bowl of warm water steeped with pine resin. Porter knelt beside the mare, murmuring low and slow as Violet pressed the cloth against the raw wound. She's calm, Violet said, surprised. She was shaking when I found her. Took a while before she let me close. She trusts you. He looked up, the lamplight catching the edge of the scar just behind his jaw. You think that's rare? I think trust doesn't come easy. Not for ones who've been hurt. He didn't answer right away. His eyes held to hers, steady and unreadable. "When I was 16, he said at last, "I spent a winter working cattle for a man out of Fort Ellis. He had a daughter, quiet girl, always looking down. She'd been promised to some railroad man. Never smiled once in the 6 weeks I was there." Violet wrung out the cloth, waiting. "One night she asked if I believed in marrying for duty. I told her I didn't know what I believed then. She said, 'Well, I do. I believe duty's what keeps women breathing.'" Violet's hands stilled, the air between them shifting like steam off a kettle. I didn't see her again, but I never forgot how she said it. Like it was a sentence. "You think that's what I was doing? Marrying for duty? I don't know what you were doing before," he said. "But I know what you're doing now, and it's not surviving anymore." She pressed the poultice to the mare's leg and tied it off. "You think I've changed? I think you're letting yourself be seen." Violet let the silence stretch. The mare shifted her weight and exhaled, soft and tired. "I've been thinking about building a root cellar," Porter said after a moment. "One deep enough to keep things through winter." She raised an eyebrow. "I know it's early. But if we start now, it'll be ready come cold." He stood, dusting off his trousers. "I could dig it myself, but I thought you might want to help plan it. You want my opinion on how to stack stones and store onions? I want your hand on the spade next to mine." She crossed her arms, but her mouth twitched with something close to amusement. "That's not how most men propose a future. I'm not most men." "No, you're not." He stepped closer. The lamplight didn't soften him, but it made him real lines around the eyes, grit in the skin, calluses thick on his knuckles. "I'm not offering comfort," he said. "I'm offering the long days, the muddy boots, the dull meals, and the quiet nights with your head next to mine when the wind tries to shake the roof loose. All of it." Violet looked up at him, her heart thudding with something that wasn't fear and wasn't longing, but something solid and still, something that stayed. "I don't want to be anyone's burden," she said. "You're not," he said. "You're the reason the place feels like more than lumber and nails." She stepped closer, her breath barely stirring the air between them. "You sure you know what you're asking for?" "I'm sure I've already got it," he said. This time, when she reached for his hand, he met it halfway. His fingers were warm, rough, and they didn't wrap around hers like a claim, just an answer. Inside the barn, the mare sighed, and the lantern flickered low. Violet leaned her forehead against his chest, and for the first time since the fire, she felt the weight of her own heart settle without pain. "You keep saying you'll prove it," she whispered. "I will. Then start by showing me where you're thinking that root cellar should go." He rested his chin against the crown of her head. "Tomorrow," he said. She smiled into his shirt front. "Tomorrow, then." By late July, the heat settled into the valley like a held breath. The river had thinned to a slow crawl, and the cottonwoods by the house had taken on a brittle edge, their leaves curling at the tips. Violet tied her hair off her neck with a strip of linen and stood at the edge of the trench Porter had dug behind the barn. The root cellar had begun to take shape stone by stone, each one fitted with care. Levi crouched beside the wheelbarrow, sorting flat rocks from jagged ones. Laurel sat beneath the shade of the overhang, humming while she wound twine around a bundle of drying mint. Porter wiped the back of his neck with a kerchief before glancing toward Violet. "I'm thinking we line the back wall with split logs," he said, resting his weight on the shovel. "Keep the damp out once the frost comes." She studied the trench. "We've got enough pine stacked near the fence line. If it's dry enough to split clean, I'll check it tonight." He leaned the shovel against the barn and stepped up beside her. "You don't have to keep helping with this, you know." "I know," she said, brushing dust from her skirt. "But I want to eat beets in January." He chuckled, low in his throat. I'll consider that a shared ambition, then. She shaded her eyes, watching a hawk wheel above the far ridge. What about when the snow comes? You ever ride out in it? Often enough. Last winter I took a trip into town after a blizzard. A neighbor's wife was birthing twins, and the doctor's wagon was stuck near Flat Creek. I helped dig him out. Twins? She asked, glancing at him. Did they make it? They did. Boys. Loudest things I ever heard. She shook her head, a small smile softening her face. I don't think I'd have managed two at once. Laurel already came into the world screaming like she'd been wronged. He looked over at the girl, now lying belly down with her nose in the herb bundle. You did all right. Violet narrowed her eyes slightly. You ever think about having your own? Sometimes, he said. But I never figured I'd find the right place to bring them into. She didn't answer, not right away. Porter stepped down into the trench again, settling into rhythm, the shovel biting deep. That night, after the children had gone quiet, Violet lit a lamp and carried it to the porch. The air was thick with the smell of dry grass and creek clay. Porter sat on the top step, his boots off, feet bare against the worn wood. She set the lamp down between them and folded her hands in her lap. I've been thinking about putting something in the ground, she said. Not just food. Something that stays. He didn't speak, just waited. A fig tree, she said. My mother had one in Alabama. It never bore much, but she said it was proof that tender things could still take root with time. You want to plant one here? I do. He looked at her, his face unreadable. Then, we'll find the right place for it. She drew her knees up, bare toes curling over the porch edge. I used to think all I needed was a roof and a way to feed the children. But I think I want more than that now. He shifted toward her. What do you want? She hesitated. A home that doesn't feel borrowed. A life that isn't just waiting for the next fire. You think I can give you that? I think you already are. Porter leaned forward, his voice low. Then tell me what's next. She met his gaze. I want to raise them here. I want to dry herbs in the kitchen and mend shirts by a stove that's ours. I want more than just survival. You'll have it. You still planning to prove it every day? He reached across the lamp's glow and took her hand. Until you stop asking me to. She didn't pull away. Then start by helping me find a fig tree. They sat like that until the lamp burned low, the night pressing gentle around them. Two people not promising forever, but building it anyway stone by stone, day by day. August came in dry and bright, the heat humming low through the grass as if the earth itself had grown restless. Violet stood behind the house, a wide-brimmed straw hat shading her brow, her skirt hem damp from the creek she'd waded through to gather watercress. She held a parcel wrapped in cloth salt pork and dried apples meant for the Parson family, who'd fallen on harder times since their youngest had taken sick. I can go alone, Porter said, tightening the girth strap on his saddle. I'd rather come, Violet replied, adjusting the weight of the parcel against her hip. It's not charity if it's from one mother to another. He didn't argue. Instead, he lifted Laurel into the saddle and settled Levi behind him, steadying them with practiced ease. Violet swung up behind Porter, her arms wrapping around his waist without hesitation. The warmth of him, the quiet strength in his shoulders, was something she now reached for without needing to think why. The trail to the Parson homestead ran along a dry ravine scattered with shale and wind-worn pine. They passed a group of antelope grazing near the ridge, their heads lifting briefly before returning to stillness. When they arrived, Porter helped the children down first. Violet handed the parcel to Mrs. Parson with a quiet word and a firm embrace. The other woman's relief showed not in tears but in the way her shoulders dropped, as though some small weight had been lifted. On the ride home, Levi fell asleep against Porter's back. Laurel leaned into Violet's chest, her breath slowing with each hoofbeat. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the prairie. They needed more than food, Violet said softly. Porter nodded, not looking back. They needed to remember they weren't alone. She rested her cheek against his back. Neither are we. That night, after the children had been put to bed in the room that once held only silence, Violet stepped outside and found Porter seated at the table he'd built beneath the cottonwood. His ledger lay open in front of him, but he wasn't writing. "It's strange," she said, sitting across from him, "to feel settled." He looked at her. "You afraid of it?" "No," she said. "I think I've just never had it long enough to believe in it." He picked up a small bundle wrapped in waxed cloth and passed it to her. Inside lay a silver thimble, worn smooth at the tip. "I found it in town," he said. "Storekeep said it belonged to his mother. Thought it might suit someone who does more with a needle than most do with a plow." She turned it in her palm. "You remembered mine was lost in the fire. I remember everything that matters." She set it down and reached across the table, her hand finding his. "There's nothing I'm waiting for anymore, Porter. Not running from anything. Not holding my breath to see if the sky falls. I want this." He didn't break her gaze. "So do I. I want to raise our children here. I want to plant that fig tree beside the house and see it grow tall. Then we will. And I want to marry you," she said, the words steady and sure. "Not out of need. Not for safety. But because I know what it is now to choose someone who sees you and stays." Porter stood and came around the table, drawing her to her feet. "You've had my yes every day since the first. This'll just make it plain." She smiled, tears stinging but not falling. "Then let's make it plain." They married 3 Sundays later, under the wide sky with a few neighbors gathered and the children dressed in their cleanest linen. There was no preacher available, so the vows were spoken by Mr. Salter, an old fur trapper who'd once been ordained back east and still remembered the words. It was enough. The house changed after that. Not in shape but in feel. Violet's sewing hung in the windows, and Porter built a shelf for the children's books above the hearth. The fig tree went into the ground just after the first frost. They wrapped its base in burlap and prayed it would root deep. Porter took fewer long rides, and Violet rose early to bake bread that filled the house with warmth. Levi began carving small animals with Porter's old knife, and Laurel grew herbs in cracked pots along the sill. There was laughter and hard work, and the kind of quiet that doesn't ask to be filled. One night, with snow ticking soft against the windows, Porter reached for Violet's hand as they sat by the fire. "We made something out of ash," he said. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "We built a life." He kissed her temple, slow and certain. "And I'll keep choosing it. Every morning." She closed her eyes, the firelight flickering behind her lids. "So will I." Beyond the walls, the wind moved through the trees, but it didn't rattle the roof. Not anymore. Inside, there was only warmth, and the steady breath of a house no longer empty. And outside, beneath the snow, the roots of a fig tree held fast.